In a small town where justice and power intersect, a brilliant doctor is called upon to save the life of the police chief's daughter. But on the dangerous road, an unexpected incident occurs. Two racist police officers decide to stop her car without a valid reason, creating an inevitable confrontation. Will Dr. Monique be able to save the girl's life? Everything is regrettable. This is a sad story, and will there be any change to this shocking event of the whole city? Follow this meaningful story to the end. If you love this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with your friends and family, and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories. Dr. Monique Turner is one of the country's leading heart surgeons. At 40, she has achieved a level of success that few can match. Her surgeries are renowned not only for their success, but also for her ability to handle the most complex medical situations. Her name appears in prestigious medical journals, and major hospitals are always ready to hire her with incredible salaries. But for Monique, the most important thing is not fame or money. She chose the medical profession because she believes that human life is the most precious thing. That evening, as she was wrapping up a long day at her private practice in Boston, her phone rang. She picked it up and heard a deep, urgent male voice on the other end. "Dr. Turner, this is Chief of Police Alan Davis of Springdale. My daughter Lily, 16 years old, has just suffered a massive heart attack. The doctors here say her condition is critical and only you can save her. I beg you, please." Monique could sense the desperation in his words. She knew that when a father, especially one as powerful as the sheriff, used the word please, the situation was dire. "Mr. Davis, I need more information," Monique replied calmly. "What has your daughter's hospital done?" "She has a severe heart rhythm disorder due to a congenital defect. The doctors here are not qualified to operate. Dr. Turner, if you hadn't come..." His voice faltered, choked. "My daughter would not have survived." Without thinking long, Monique agreed immediately. "I'll be there right away. I need the hospital address and all of Lily's medical records emailed to me right now." Less than 20 minutes later, Monique had packed her gear and was on her way. Springdale was about 300 miles from Boston, or about a 5-hour drive. It wasn't a short drive, but in her current situation, she didn't have time to wait for a flight or other transportation. Her SUV sped down the nighttime highway. On the seat next to her, her laptop displayed Lily's medical records. From the information the hospital had sent her, Monique knew that this would be a difficult surgery. Lily had a septal defect, a condition that prevented blood from flowing properly through the chambers of her heart. The defect caused irregular heartbeats, and without immediate surgery, she would die. Thoughts about the surgical steps that needed to be performed kept running through Monique's mind. But even as she focused on her craft, she couldn't stop thinking about the pressure of time. With each passing minute, Lily's chances of survival decreased. Monique stepped on the gas. The car picked up speed, but she stayed within the highway speed limit. In the dim light of the road, she weaved past cars, hoping to make time. Along the way, Monique couldn't help but reflect on her own past experiences. She had been underestimated many times, not because of her abilities, but because of her race and gender. As a black woman in medicine, she had to work twice as hard as her peers to gain recognition. As a young woman, Monique encountered skeptical looks when she entered medical conferences. Many looked at her with surprise, or even disdain, as if a black woman could not possibly be an expert in the medical field. But Monique never let those prejudices stop her. Instead, she used them as motivation to prove that talent has no color. Sheriff Davis's pleas for help echoed in Monique's head. As a father, he must be facing his greatest fear, the fear of losing his beloved daughter. She knew that in his eyes, she was not just a doctor, but his last hope. Monique also thought of Lily, a 16-year-old girl who should be enjoying her beautiful youth but is fighting a serious illness. She felt the heavy responsibility placed on her shoulders, and that made her not allow herself to delay even for a minute. As she approached the city of Springdale, Monique realized she was in an unfamiliar suburb. As a black woman, she was no stranger to scrutiny or even hostility when she entered areas where her presence might be considered inappropriate. She carefully observed everything around her. With her professionalism, Monique always knew how to stay calm and face every situation. But this time, what she feared most was not the scrutinizing eyes, but the delay. There must be no more wasting of time, she told herself. With that thought in mind, Monique stepped on the gas, determined to get to the hospital as quickly as possible. But she did not know that ahead an unexpected challenge awaited her. A challenge not related to medical expertise, but related to the social prejudice she had always faced. Dr. Monique Turner's SUV sped through the streets of Springdale, each passing second adding to her tension. The clock on the dashboard read 2 a.m., but Monique's mind was not tired. She had only one goal: to get to the hospital in time to save the life of Lily, who was fighting for her life. But just as she began to see the lights of Springdale, a flash of red and blue flashed in her rearview mirror. Monique frowned. It was a patrol car from the police checkpoint. She silently prayed that they were just passing by, but that wasn't the case. The police car let out a short siren, signaling her to stop. A feeling of unease began to rise in her. Monique knew she was not breaking any traffic laws. She was driving at 70 miles per hour, the speed limit on this highway. But she couldn't ignore the policeman's signal. She pulled over and waited. 2 police officers stepped out of their patrol car, their eyes immediately making Monique uncomfortable. One was a middle-aged man with short hair walking to her window. The other stood behind her in a defensive stance, his hand hovering near the gun at his side. "Driver's license and vehicle registration," the policeman said in a cold, unfriendly voice. Monique rolled down her window and handed him her papers. "Officer, I don't think I did anything wrong. I was going the speed limit." The officer squinted at her through the window. "We noticed you passing several vehicles on the road. Where were you coming from, and where were you going at that speed?" Monique took a deep breath to calm herself. "I'm Dr. Monique Turner. I'm from Boston, and I'm on my way to the hospital in Springdale. I was asked by Sheriff Alan Davis to operate on his daughter. She's in critical condition." The 2 policemen exchanged glances, then burst out laughing. "Sheriff Alan Davis," the officer behind him said sarcastically. "You think we're going to believe the sheriff called you to save his daughter, a black woman driving from out of town in the middle of the night?" Monique felt the blood rush to her face. "I don't have time to argue. I'm in a hurry. Please let me go." The officer holding her papers stood still, making no move to return them. "Look, Miss Turner, or whoever you claim to be, we have every right to suspect a black woman driving a car with Boston plates into our city in the middle of the night. How do we know you're not transporting anything illegal?" Monique felt a pang of injustice in her chest. "Officer, I am a heart surgeon. My job is to save lives. I don't have time to explain. If you don't believe me, call Sheriff Davis directly." "Oh, now you tell us how to do our job." The cop smirked. "And what if I don't call? Who knows what you might have in your car?" Monique gripped the steering wheel tightly to keep from letting her anger show. She knew that if she overreacted, the situation could get worse. But the contemptuous looks from the 2 police officers made her feel like she was facing an insurmountable wall of prejudice. "You are wasting precious time. A 16-year-old girl could have died if I hadn't gotten there in time." Monique's voice shook with anger and worry. "A 16-year-old girl," the officer repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "That sounds touching, but we don't believe it. Do you have any proof of what you're saying?" Monique was angry. "Mr. Police Officers, If the police chief's daughter dies, you will not be responsible, I warn you." At this moment, a policeman felt very angry because in his mind, an ordinary black woman could not talk to him like that. The policeman felt offended and immediately pulled out his gun and pointed it at her and shouted, "You bastard! Who are you to dare threaten us? Do you believe that I will make you regret it immediately?" Monique felt very scared when a gun was pointed at her, but she tried to stay calm. "Officer, please let me prove what I am saying is true," knowing there was no way to convince them other than to contact the police chief directly. She took out her phone and dialed Mr. Davis's number. When the other end of the line picked up, Monique quickly explained the situation. "Chief Davis, I was stopped by 2 officers at a highway checkpoint. They don't believe me, and I can't move, and they have guns pointed at me." Mr. Davis's voice became urgent. "Give them your phone right now." Monique slowly raised the phone toward the officer. "The chief wants to talk to you." The policeman frowned but took the phone. "Hello?" Although Monique couldn't hear the conversation clearly, she could tell from the expression on the policeman's face. His eyes widened, and he immediately put his gun back into the holster at his waist. The initial arrogant expression disappeared, replaced by confusion and fear. "Yes, sir," he said in a lower voice. "We will let her go immediately." When the call ended, the police officer returned the papers and the phone to Monique. "You can go. I apologize for the misunderstanding." The police officer's expression and tone were completely different now. Monique looked at him coldly. "You guys have wasted precious time. I just hope it's not too late." She started the car and drove away, not even looking back at the 2 policemen. When Monique arrived at Springdale Hospital, it was just after 3 a.m. She rushed into the emergency room where Sheriff Davis was waiting with a worried look on his face. "Dr. Turner!" He ran over, his eyes pleading for help. "You're here! She's in the emergency room!" Monique didn't answer. She immediately changed into surgical gown and checked on Lily. But as soon as she entered the room, she realized the worst had happened. Lily's heart stopped. Other doctors tried to resuscitate her, but all efforts failed. After a few minutes, they had to declare an end to the emergency. Monique stood silently in the room, a feeling of helplessness overwhelming her. Even though she had done everything in her power to get here as quickly as possible, the slightest delay had cost her the chance to save Lily's life. Outside in the hallway, Sheriff Davis's sobs could be heard. Monique stepped out, her eyes meeting his. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I did everything I could." Davis collapsed, his shoulders shaking with sobs. But when he raised his head, the pain quickly turned to anger. "Who stopped you?" Monique didn't need to answer, he already knew. "2 policemen at the checkpoint," she said simply. Davis clenched his fists, anger flashing in his eyes. "They took my daughter's life." Monique stood before him, her eyes filled with sympathy and regret. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Davis. There was nothing more I could do. I did everything I could to make it." Her voice broke, her defeat overwhelming. Davis took a deep breath, then bowed his head. The words of reproach wanting to come out but being swallowed back. After a long moment, he looked up. His eyes had changed, no longer filled with pain, now with anger. "You know, Monique, I have lived my life with dignity and justice. But today, those police officers not only did wrong, they also violated my trust in the people I entrusted to protect the community. Their actions are unacceptable." His voice was firm. Monique looked at him, understanding that in this moment he had not only lost his daughter, but had also faced an injustice so suffocating that she could no longer breathe. The guilt of her delay, even though it was not her fault, still haunted her. But now, What she needed to do was stand up for justice and help him defend his values. "You can trust me, Sheriff. I will do everything I can to help you. I have a camera in my car that recorded the incident," Monique said, looking straight at him, determined. Davis did not answer immediately. He took his phone from his pocket and dialed. A moment later, when the call connected, he began to speak in a firm voice. When the call ended, Davis turned back to Monique. "I called the police department's human resources chief, and they immediately began an investigation into those 2 officers. I can't let this go without consequences." Monique said nothing, but her eyes were filled with gratitude. She knew that Davis's anger, not just his words, would create the power to change. Those racist police officers would not escape their responsibility. An hour later, the first news began to spread through the Springdale police community. Chief Davis, a well-respected man, had ordered an investigation and the firing of 2 police officers who had racially discriminated against Dr. Monique Turner. Their colleagues were surprised and bewildered because everyone knew that in the police force, confronting a superior, especially one as respected as Davis, was not easy. Davis sat in his office, tapping his fingers on the desk, mixed emotions swirling inside him. With each passing minute, he knew his life would never be the same. He had lost Lily, but at least he could do something to ensure justice for her. Monique left the hospital after a few hours of working with the medical team and supporting the sheriff's family. She didn't want to interrupt too much, but Davis's words echoed in her mind, promises of justice, of change. After the 2 officers were suspended and an investigation was launched, Davis decided not to let the matter end there. He ordered the police department's legal department to prepare a formal complaint about the officers' alleged racial discrimination. All information would be made public, and there would be no protection for those who violated their civil rights. By this time, public attention was beginning to shift. Local newspapers reported on the police chief's firing of the 2 officers and criticized the act of racial discrimination. The public gradually became more aware of the injustice Monique had suffered. A protest against racial discrimination and police reform was held in the city of Springdale. Davis was the one who spoke at a press conference after the investigation concluded. He stood before reporters, his eyes resolute and his voice firm. "Racism has no place in our organization. The actions of these 2 officers are not only a violation of our professional ethics, but also an affront to the justice and equality that we have always pledged to protect. I have called for their immediate termination." Monique stood behind the chief throughout the press conference. She felt an unexpected sense of pride as she watched his statements. The officers may have hurt her, but it was Davis's firm, decisive decision that had set things right. After the incident, Monique returned to her job, but never forgot what happened in Springdale. She wrote a letter to Chief Davis, thanking him for his decisive action and asserting that it was a necessary turning point in policing. "Thank you for not only saving lives, but for upholding justice for us. We can make a difference only if each of us is willing to stand up to wrongs," she wrote. Sheriff Davis, despite the loss of his daughter, has regained his respect and faith in justice. He knows that fighting prejudice is not an easy fight, but he will be the one to lead the way in protecting justice and fairness in his community. With loss and pain in his heart, but also with new hope and determination, Sheriff Davis is not only a leader, but a symbol of change, of a more just future. Thank you for taking the time to follow the whole story. If you love this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with friends and family, and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories. Once again, thank you for being with us. See you in the next stories.